Morning, everyone. We're just waiting for a few people to join, so just bear with us while people are signing in. Thank you. Okay, well, look, I think we'll make a start and welcome everyone to the RPMA's webinar series. Look, this month we've got a very interesting topic. It's called War Stories from the Trenches, and we've got a couple of very interesting stories to share to be able to talk through, how these situations arose, but also to identify how they might have been prevented in the future. So there's a lot to come on that. For those of you that I haven't met before, my name is Tony Mitchell, and I am the chair of RPMA. Look, and it's my pleasure today to introduce to you the two panelists that we have. The two panelists, so I think I've seen a third panelist arise as well, in Richard Horne, so that's fantastic. So we have three panelists today. The first one that will share their story is David Pearse. David Pearse has been in the industry since 2004. Well, actually in and around the industry for a lot longer than that. He's also the individual who started Pukeko Rental Managers. He has won multiple awards in the industry, and he's also the immediate past chair of the RPMA. So welcome, David. Pleasure to have you here. The second presenter that you will hear from is Karl Jackson. Karl is a council member of the RPMA, and he's also a business owner of a residential property management business as well. And we're very much looking forward to Karl's presentation after David's. And the third person who, for most of you, will need no introduction. He recently chaired the RPMA conference, which was last Friday. That is Richard Horne. Richard Horne, as you know, also is a business owner, property investor, and runs his own residential property management business. So welcome, Richard. Pleasure to have you here.
Thanks.
All right. Now, look, I believe David's going to start off. But first of all, David, we do have a video that we want to share first. And an apology in advance for some of the language that's in the video, that it wasn't my selection, but the panelists wanted to show it. But let's play the video, and it'll display the horror story that's evolving. So please, Micah, if you could play the video.
We're just going through arrest procedures. We'll try and cuff all three occupants. And we'll get in priority rolling. Yeah.
The knees. Cool. Sit back and cool. Hands out to the side, hurry up. Down. Hands out to the side. The small of your back.
Turn the other way. Yeah, look, no.
Okay, I think that's probably enough, Micah. Look, David, there's a lot going on in that video. We tried to work our way through without much of the swearing, but look, I'll hand over to you to talk through what was going on. It looks like a horror story, and over to you, David.
It was a horror story. This was given to me by another property manager, and not from our group, I'm pleased to say. But again, it's worthy to have a look at. This is a situation where, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm disappointed there wasn't a little bit of swearing. It just added to the atmosphere and the door being busted open. But this is a story of a property management company that actually managed an apartment and they ran it as a B&B. And I think it's probably a real case example of where it used to be years ago, we used to say book a batch really means book a lab. And this is a case where a convicted drug supplier and former bikie was caught in a compromising position. Unfortunately, he was a B&B occupant in this rental property that this company was managing. The property was in Horne's Bay, and in February 2021, you had that situation. Now, what the New Zealand Herald reported was that when they found him, he was hunched over the toilet. The bath taps were running, and he was trying to furiously pour a lot of methamphetamine down the toilet, and it spilled it all over. He'd ripped the toilet seat off. He'd had a gun and he threw it out the window, and it landed on the neighbour's porch. So it was quite a mess. And again, the methamphetamine was spilled on the floor in the notes. It was in an affluent inner city Auckland suburb where, of course, meth issues don't happen, do they? And also contained about $120,000 worth of cash, 5 mobile phones and scales. But what's more, for a follow-up story, he was put into, while he was awaiting on bail, he was put into a drug rehab facility, and that was raided, where he was actually supplying methamphetamine and guns there as well. So he ended a quick ticket straight to jail. But that's the sort of thing that you don't really want to happen in your apartment that you're looking after. So, we lost the sound.
Oh, sorry. I was on mute. So look, David, that's an absolute horror story, as you've said. How do you think that property manager, that situation occurred, and what could have they done to perhaps avoid it?
Well, I think at the end of the day, you've got to realise that while a B&B situation, I know some people do it, it means that they can actually get more money for the owners. The other side of it you've got to be really careful about is that you actually have some sort of vetting. And usually on a book a batch or a B&B, I don't know how much vetting that they do, but again, you really need to know who's coming into your property, especially on short terms. You're not doing any meth testing. So it's a bit of a concern. So there is a risk involved in that.
Thank you. Anything else to add on that? Or any questions from our other panelists for David while he's in the hot seat?
Come on, Richard.
I mean, that must have been a dark day for that property manager to have the boys beating the door down. It's a shame we didn't see the neighbours turning up in her towel, wondering why next door was being raided. That was an interesting moment that you've all missed.
Who would do that?
Yeah,
I know.
So for those of you who aren't aware what Richard's referring to, we skipped the bit in the video where that actually happened, unfortunately.
Yeah, the neighbour came out to see what the noise was. Jeez. Unbelievable.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for that, David. I think, as you've said, tenant selection and going the extra mile to do your web research, not just do the credit checks, reference checks, other background checks, but you've got to do additional work as well on that to make sure that you get good tenants. That one's a little bit different with a book a batch, but that issue does actually happen. I'm aware of situations where there has been houses that have been rented specifically for meth house, as we know. So it does happen for rental properties as well. Next, Karl, we'll move to you if we can, and maybe if you could share a story that whether it's yours or someone else's, that would be wonderful to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I apologise, there's some noise. My neighbour's having a roof fitted. And they've just decided now to take the scaffolding off, which is always a good plan. So look, I guess mine is look. We always talk about bad tenants, but actually sometimes we have bad owners. And this is one of my stories. Probably right from the get-go, I should have seen a little red flag. Whereas somebody that I know who's a lawyer had insisted that this person get a property manager to manage their property. I, being the sort of guy I am, took it on. Um, having a good owner that is responsible and realizes they have certain responsibilities around the maintenance of their properties. We've probably all come across those owners that don't have a lot of free money. But this particular property was in bad condition. On first look, it looked fine, but after we'd got tenants in and then we started to look a little deeper, we found that there were parts of the property that were rotten and were actually very close to collapsing. We had front stairs going up, and once we pulled off to see what was going on with that, because it was leaning a bit, there was a bottle jack holding the stairs up. And so I went through the whole process of getting contractors to look at it, and this particular owner would require me to get 3 quotes on absolutely everything, which I know is a bit of a challenge in today's market. And the owner would then just say, "Oh, thank you for doing that, but I don't have any money." This all culminated in when a handrail which had been rotten, we told him it needs to be done and needs to be done urgently, had given way, and a tenant received an injury. The owner was trying to play games with the insurance company, trying to get them to cover part of it, trying to cover this, that, and the other. In the end, I just felt it was really exposing myself and my business to bad practice, and I wasn't prepared to keep that owner on. We don't like saying goodbye to owners because at the end of the day, it's our bottom line. But I think being brave enough to say to an owner, "I'm sorry, but I can't work with you anymore," is important in our industry.
That's a timely reminder, I think, Karl. Were there any warning signs at the start when you first met and engaged with this owner that would have indicated that the situation was going to unfold?
Yeah, I guess, look, we didn't know the extent of it. Wasn't until we sort of got really under the house and started seeing other problems that we started realizing the state of condition of the house. But this particular owner had a healthy homes done, healthy homes assessment, and it was, shall we say, not very thorough. So I picked up that there was a pipe going straight down onto the ground outside the garage, and that's why they were having a leak in there. And then I started going through the process. Well, we need to get this done. We need to bring it up to standards, and that's when the excuses started to flow. "Oh, but we've had it signed off." I said, "We may have had it signed off, but actually, I can tell you 100% now that isn't compliant, and I'm not an assessor." So I guess very early on, the money problems were there.
Yeah, so look, I guess the key learning is sometimes you've actually got to let owners go when they're not going to uphold the standards that are required. Is there anything
100%.
you would have done differently that you could share?
In all honesty, I probably should have done it earlier.
Yeah.
I have the sort of personality. I'm quite tenacious. I'll try and keep things going and try and work with people. But every single step of the way, there was some sort of barrier was put up in front of me, and I should have realized that earlier and actually said, "Look, this isn't going to work."
Okay, thank you for sharing. Look, on that note, we'll move on to Richard. Richard, I'll see if you've got any horror stories, war stories from the trenches that you'd like to share, please.
Oh, so many. Over the years I've collected I've actually got a file going with lots of stories from other property managers about the run-ins they've had with tenants, and I've changed tack on this because of what Karl was talking about. When I tell people I'm a property manager, they quite often go, "Oh, you must have lots of trouble with your tenants." And it's like, no, not really, because we select our tenants carefully. Our owners select us, and sometimes you're stuck with an owner that you really don't want. So I wanted to talk about one particular gentleman that I had in Wellington who had managed his old family home in Hataitai for a long time, and finally decided he needed a property manager, and he picked me. So it was actually quite a nice house, a big old 4-bedroom place on 2 levels with giant sea views, and I got some lovely tenants. And she was the tenant was a couple, but the husband was overseas most of the time, and so she lived there, I think, with her 2 daughters. And she started ringing up after about 3 or 4 months saying, there's somebody in the garden doing something to the fence. Did you do that? And I said, no, don't know what that is. I got in touch with my owner, and he said, oh, that was me. I was fixing one of the palings in the fence. I'm like, oh, okay. So then a couple of weeks later, another phone call from the tenant saying, hi, he's up on the roof. I'm like, oh, okay. So phoned up my owner. Are you up on the roof? And he said, yeah, I'm fixing a loose tile, and one of the bits of the spouting is a bit dicky. Okay. Another 2-3 weeks go by, I get another phone call from the tenant. She's saying, I'm getting a bit pissed off with this. He's doing something in the front garden with plants and rocks. I don't know what he's doing. So, the same process. We went through this for months and months. And eventually I pulled him up and I said, you have to stop doing this. And he backed off. And that went on for another couple of months, and then he was back at it. He was there almost every week, doing something, not notified, hasn't told anybody, certainly not me. And I said to my tenant, could you comfortably walk through your lounge in your underwear and feel that you have your privacy? And she said, no, because he'll be out there doing something. So then I ended up having a nose-to-nose with this owner on the front lawn of his house, because I said, you've got to stop this. You've got to give me the property. I've already given it to your tenant, and she's a good tenant and she's paying rent, but she is going to take you to court and she is going to burn you. And he was so affronted that I had the gall to stand up to him that he fired me on the spot, which was such a relief, to be honest. But I do contend that we all, and anybody listening to me now, you will know at least one owner that you go, oh, wow, I'd love to get rid of them. And I understand Karl's input saying we don't like to lose owners, but sometimes you just have to sack them, get rid of them, hand them back the keys, and get on with a more satisfying work life than having somebody like that on your books.
Thank you.
No worries.
So I didn't expect that we'd have 2 war stories with owners to start with, but there you go.
Yeah.
Interesting point. So look, David, we'll head back to you. I know that you have an additional story. Karl and Richard may have another one as well if we have time. But would you like to share another one, please?
Yeah, this is a story that I was personally involved with, and I don't want to add up the hours that went into this case. I inherited a property, took over some properties, but inherited one in Taupaki in West Auckland. And it was a couple with their son were tenants. He was an older son. But straight away, things started happening. I was starting to get these emails and text messages. Mainly seemed like paranoia. The guy, because it's a large section lifestyle property, we had the lawns being mowed, and she was complaining that the lawn mowing guy was peering in the window and keeping an eye on her. She also complained the owner had his van outside on the street and was watching her, but in fact it wasn't his van. It just was a van similar to him, his. And then you had a situation where a swimming pool where they had one of those ones with the very large walls. And unfortunately, I kept telling her, she kept on leaving the ladder in with no fences in the front, in the park where kids were playing across the road. I just said, there's no way you can do this. You've got to actually remove the ladder when you're not using it, even just pick it up and put it inside the pool. I don't want any kids drowning on my watch. But she didn't. In the end, with all the paranoia, and issues that we're having, I decided I was going to do a suspicion test for methamphetamine, and was pretty shocked with the results that came back. There were at least 4 rooms that were over 30 micrograms, and the tenant didn't seem to be aware or was not aware at that time that when they took the tenancy, there was a baseline meth test done. So I actually ended up going to the tribunal 4 times. What made it worse is I'd since moved to the Hawke's Bay and had to travel up there for each of the cases. The first was an eviction, which was pretty straightforward. The second one, I went up there to actually do the damages and put our case, but the adjudicator ruled without letting us know prior that she didn't believe that the tenant had been adequately served. The third one was a hearing where the partner pleaded bankruptcy and didn't have to attend, but at that hearing, the adjudicator awarded $1,000 in exemplary damages. I was pretty upset about that. So we organised a rehearing, and the rehearing was by the same adjudicator, which at the time I didn't think was done. I thought they usually handed off to someone fresh. The adjudicator awarded the $1,000 exemplary damages because she thought that at 4 rooms at 30 micrograms, that the insurance payout of $30,000 would have been enough to reduce or decontaminate those 4 rooms to below 15 micrograms. And I was under the opinion that under the Gluckman report that if there was over 30, it could have been cooking being done in the property, and so it should actually be reduced to 1.5 micrograms. I think it costed the owner about, because this is an old style house with veneer polish and whatever, it cost him something in the order of $70,000 to decontaminate it. In the rehearing, I got, and I'm going to shout out to them because they're absolutely brilliant, and if you need help, these 2 guys are good. Gavin Bush from Drug Free Testing, who's the chairman of the organisation, and Miles Stratford from Health and Safety Home Solutions, who was formerly Meth Solutions. They came as professional witness at no charges for me at the rehearing, and we were awarded an additional $19,000. But anyone in property management and tribunal hearing knows it doesn't stop there. It's one thing getting the award, it's the other thing getting the money. And we've had New Zealand Collections go hard out to try and get that money ever since. Also, just to make things worse, we actually had a video of a lady looked very, very similar to the tenant with her dyed hair, same colour, who spray painted graffiti all over the front of the house after the tribunal hearing. So yeah, that's my horror story. I don't ever want to do it again. When you work out the time, the mileage, dollar terms, it would just, but at the end of the day, we got a result for the owner.
That's well done with the end result. Absolute horror story, as you said. Was that a property that you inherited with the tenant, or?
Yes, yes, it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
And famous question. Why do you think it happened in the first place? Obviously, you didn't select the tenant, but how to avoid it, or what would have you done different?
And I think that's the thing. When I look back at the horror stories and thinking about what I would share today, it keeps on coming back to tenant selection as the problem. And I'm in a unique position where I actually give advice to people around the country, and that's what I hear is that when you take over a property, don't have a look closely at the tenant that's there, and make sure that they've done the due diligence in selecting them.
So,
I know of a colleague up in Tauranga who's dealing with 2 properties at the moment. One of them had a conviction against them in Auckland. They've taken over this rent roll, and they were kicked out and had to pay damages. And this person previous property manager put them into the property. And another one where they allowed the rent arrears to get up into a lot of money. So again, it's a matter of now all the time that's involved in getting those situations put right for the owner.
So I'm interested in, what little tips within the tenant selection that people should be doing, because obviously there's a standard approach that most people will follow with you're using rentee or tenancy services. You've got all of the background checks, the credit checks are happening, but issues can still creep through. I had a situation where an individual, I didn't know this at the time, but had been deported from Australia to New Zealand, but in New Zealand has a clean record. So it was only through additional internet searching that I picked up on that. So I was quite surprised when that first happened, that that wasn't picked up already within the existing checks. But have you got any advice as to, other than the standard checks, what people should do?
I think TPS and Renty with their the reference checks, the background checks, the credit checks are all good. However, I'm very suspicious over the years I've been in it to actually make sure that the person I'm talking to, who's the landlord, is actually the landlord. I caught a lady out one time, it was her daughter, and it was how do they pay the rent? Oh, no, they're great, and every question was they're great, but I started to get the red flag. And I think a lot of property managers go with your gut feeling. If you don't feel right about it, make sure that you do. I know there's pressure on getting properties filled and beating the opposition if it's a good tenant, but I think it's really is important to actually make sure you do that due diligence if you're wanting to have a good property management relationship with that tenant and the owner.
Thank you. Look, any additional thoughts on that from Richard or from Karl?
Oh, I could probably chip in that having a wee look around social media it can give you some interesting perspective on tenants who are viewing one of your properties as a likely place to live in, and with employees as well. I have had a tenant who, when we jumped onto their Facebook page, there was pictures and videos of them doing burnouts in the street and having giant parties in the house that they were in. And that doesn't fill you with glee, to be honest. So a little bit of social media stuff, and as David rightly points out, if you've been doing this long enough, you kind of get a feel for it. And so if it doesn't feel right in your gut, it's probably not right. But you're not taking the risk. Your landlord or your owner you're taking the risk on their behalf. So you better get it right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In terms of the social media, something else that is an okay tool to use is when you get your Trade Me advert up and then they apply to you through Trade Me, you actually have the option to click on their Trade Me account. Now, some people set up an account just for searching for properties, but if they've got a history of not paying and bad trades, that can show up, and there's your first red flag right there.
Yeah, that's useful. Thanks, Karl.
Yeah, it is good tip.
Okay, I'm just going to check the chat to see if there's any questions. I know that David's already answered one of the questions that's come in. I don't see any other questions there. So we're due for, this was a half an hour session. We're pretty much approaching the half hour mark, 11:30. I'll see if there's any final comments or words from any of our panelists before we head off.
I think for me, it would just be trust your gut. Often, you can feel if something's not right and go down that rabbit hole if you're feeling that.
Well, I think be careful in your selection of owners. I mean, not so much selection, but have a close look at somebody who's handing you the keys to their house. On a bright sunny day, all the owners are lovely people who will pay bills and get things fixed straight away. And then you get the bad ones, and it just creates so much work for you trying to, coordinate things for an owner that just won't pay. Yeah, it can be irritating, but tenants mostly are pretty good.
And last word from you, David.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is both. Tenants, it's really important to get it right so that you've got that rent coming in and you've got it's all very smooth. But the thing that used to keep me tossing and turning night was owners and who are unrealistic expectations. And it cuts you because you're working hard to do a really good job for them, and it's as if nothing's ever going to be good enough for them, and they expect you they missed a rent. Oh, we'll kick them out. You know, they've got no idea, and their expectation is just over the Richter scale. And even now, I still get them. I don't pick that up with the red flags, but I think you're better off pushing the eject button sooner rather than later, because you really do need to. It's your mental health, and you really need to enjoy the job.
Sound advice.
That is sound advice.
And look, thank you all to our all three panelists today for sharing stories of the war stories in the trenches. I hope you've all picked up some insights as to what you should do, and it's been fairly clear on the tenants and on the landlord side. So again, I'd just like to thank the panelists for coming on today and sharing stories, whether they were theirs or someone else's. It's a great learning opportunity for everyone. Okay, and on that note, we will bid you all farewell. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.